Now that we've seen how to work directly with maps in the Google Maps API, we're going to use another one of its functions called geocoding. And this will give us an opportunity to use an aspect of the API that doesn't actually require a map at all. Alright, so geocoding is the process of taking an address and working out exactly where it is. And that's something that Google Maps does for you very nicely. So if we click on samples again from the Google Maps JavaScript API page, and you can see down here we've got geolocation. So this is actually a really nice example which does a fair bit more than it needs to. We get a little pop-up which, once you've given it permission, it finds your location and puts it on a map. So let's grab all of that code. I'm going to copy it and we'll have a quick look at it to see how it works. And I'm going to copy everything above that final script because that contains my API key. So then I'll just get rid of that bit from the demo code, and then let's have a look. So it loads up the map. It requests to know your location. And if you press allow, then it shows you exactly where your location is. So this time, rather than go through the code in detail with you, I'm going to set you a mini challenge, and that is change the code so as well as pointing to your location on the map, it also alerts the user's latitude and longitude. Go for it. All right, did you manage it? Let's take a look. So it should have been pretty simple once you've had a look at this code. We're familiar with this first bit here, which creates the Google map. We've then got an info window, which I would guess is this location found box which pops up. And then here, this is where it's doing the get current position. And in fact, here is where we get the latitude and longitude. So to display them, we can just use alert and then something like latitude. And then we can get that from the pos array or position array. And then we want the latitude or lat within that array. And then for the longitude, we'll get again pos, and then this time we want lung. All right, let's take a look. And there we go. So we've got the latitude there and the longitude. So now that we've seen how to get the user's location, we're going to see how to geocode with the Google Maps API. And this is, again, how to get the full details of an address or particular location. So click back on Google Maps APIs. Then now we're going to look at web services. So the web APIs that we've just looked at integrate directly into your HTML pages. Web services work a bit more like a traditional API in that we call a particular URL and then get some data back from that. So let's see how we make that work. First off, we'll get a key. So this works in exactly the same way as with the Google Maps JavaScript API. And I'm just going to create a new project again, and that will generate the API key. While that's going, let's jump back to our web services documentation page and click Google Maps Geocoding API. And here we go. So you can see the geocoding is a process of taking an address and converting it into geographical coordinates. It also will fill out the address for us. So for example, it will take a part of an address and make it into a full address with postcode and everything else, which will help us with the postcode app that we're going to make in the next video. So here we go. We're going to make a request to this URL, and it's going to return in JSON or XML. And we're going to be using JSON here. So I'm going to scroll down. Feel free to read the documentation in a bit more detail, but I'm going to go straight to an example. So here's a full URL. Let's copy it into our web page. So I'm going to get rid of everything here, and we're going to start by doing this in PHP. So this is the URL that we need. Obviously we need to replace the API key with our API key, which should now almost have been created. Just need to click create there, and then that will create the key for us. And there it is. So let's copy that over onto our URL, and then we'll use file get contents to get the contents of the URL. So let's take a look at that. So you can see straight away, immediately we've got everything that we need. So we've got an address components here, long name, short name, etc. We've got the town or city, the state, country, and the zip code there as well. And finally, we've got the latitude and longitude. So as we've already processed JSON with PHP, we're going to do it with JavaScript this time, or specifically with jQuery. And this will prepare for our postcode web app. So to get the contents of a URL using JavaScript or jQuery, we use AJAX. And normally AJAX is linked to URLs on the same domain as your code. But there are some exceptions, and one of those is the data is encoded in JSON. And when that's the case, we can do what's known as a cross-domain request to get the data. So let's firstly get jQuery back in our app. I'll do that with a jQuery CDN Google search, CDN being Content Delivery Network. And I'll go for the google.com CDN. And there we go. We'll go for this one. All right. I'll leave that there for the moment, but we'll create a very simple HTML page with just a title, geocoding and address, and then a body. And then just after that, we're going to have our jQuery. So now let's write some JavaScript to get our data. So we'll set up our JavaScript, and then the AJAX call is going to be pretty similar to what we're used to, but with a couple of small differences. So we start off as before, calling the AJAX function, and then we're going to do this with a bunch of parameters. And the first one is going to be, as usual, the URL, and that of course is going to be the same as what we had before. And then we'll add a type of get. So this is a get request rather than a post one, because we're just getting something, we're not posting any variables. And then we just need to add a function to happen on success, so when the data is returned. So let's create a function which will contain the variable data. And then for now, we'll just console.log the JSON data. And then, if I spell function correctly, we'll now be able to get the data via AJAX rather than PHP. So let's have a look. I'm going to right click and inspect to take a look at the console. And you can see we've got an object there, and this has all the data that we need in that we've seen before. So if, for example, we wanted to get these address components, so the number, the route or road name, etc., then we'd have to loop through this particular JSON array. So for example, we could use the jQuery each function, which loops through objects in an array just like this. And we want to loop through the results part of our data because that's where all the results are contained. So we want to apply the each function on data, results, and then we want to do something with that data. So we'll create a function, and in this function we're going to have a key and a value, and the key is going to represent the name, so that bit there, and the value is going to represent the value, so 1600, or that array there. And then we'll create that, and then for now we'll just alert the key just to see what we get. Let's take a look. So you can see we've got 0 there, and that's because within the results array there's only one item, and that's this whole array here containing all of our data. So let's narrow in a little bit and loop through results 0 instead. So this will be the first set of results, and you can see that the first key within that is address components, and then formatted address, geometry, place ID, and types. So that's these elements here: formatted address, geometry, place ID, and types. So if we want to get the address components, we could go even further into that and look at the address components array. And let's now have a loop through that. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. You get the idea. So that's looping through each of these sub-arrays. So now that you know roughly how these things work, I'm just going to set you a mini challenge. Can you get the country? So can you add some code from here to get either United States or US from this data? It's not easy, but you should be able to figure it out. Go for it. Well, I hope you managed it. So the way I'm going to do it is looking at value. And value is this array here, and then this one and this one. So for each of the values, we want to be looking at value and types. And we want to find the one that has a type of country. So notice that types itself is an array. So the bit that we're going to be interested is types 0, which is the first item in the types array there. So let's take a look. Let's first off just see what that value is. So it starts off as street number, route, locality, administrative area, and country. So we want to check to see if the type, that is value types 0, is equal to country. Then we want to alert the long name or the short name. So let's just go for value short name. Let's take a look. And there we go. So I hope you figured out something fairly simple. Essentially, it's a matter of looping through until we find the type that we want and then extracting that data. Great. So now that we're reasonably familiar with the Google Maps APIs, we're going to make a little web app that allows people to extract the postcode or zip code closest to an address.